It wasn't. It was 3.
Yeah, well, you're going to be there.
No, you're going to be there. Okay, good afternoon, guys. As is now customary, we'll start with a few words from Gareth Southgate to kick us off before we throw it open to the floor for questions.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're obviously looking forward to 2 important qualifiers, which if we get right, we have the opportunity to secure our qualification. I think I said this last time, but it's getting increasingly difficult to pick a squad because the competition for places is more and more intense. So there have been some difficult decisions to make. But I think it's an exciting squad. We've got players that are very much in form. Still an emphasis on development of some of our younger players as well. But surrounded by good experience, which is critical for us with the way the team is. So we're looking forward to these matches.
Carve, do you think you started?
Gareth, first of all, Tammy Abraham is back in your squad. Was that an easy decision to make, considering how well he's been playing for Chelsea?
It was really. I mean, he's the leading English goal scorer in the league. So he's obviously a player that we put into the squad very young, at a time where we wanted to have a look at some younger players and change the complexion of what we were doing back in November ahead of the World Cup. That was a bit early for him, and now it's brilliant, the opportunity he's been given by Frank, along with some of the other young English players at Chelsea. So that's been fabulous for them. Great reward for their academy, which has always been brilliantly run by Neil Bath, I have to say. So great chance for Tammy. He's always scored goals with our junior teams. He's always scored goals through Chelsea's youth teams. He's done that on loan in the Championship fairly consistently, and now he's really grasped this opportunity at the beginning of the season. So it's thoroughly well deserved.
He also qualifies to play for Nigeria. Has he told you that he wants to play for England? Because obviously if he features in any of these 2 games, that would mean that he'd definitely be an England player going forward.
Well, I haven't discussed it with him. I've left Frank to have the conversation to let him know that he's in the squad, which is always nice for a club manager to be able to do. We've not selected him. We've got, well, literally close to hundreds of players now in our system who are dual nationality. So I don't think it's ethically right just to give a player a cap to make sure that they can't play for somebody else. So the 2 boys that are in the squad this time, Fik and Tammy, are in on merit. I'm not going to guarantee that they're going to get on the pitch. But they've both been part of our junior system right the way through. Fik came in a little bit later than Tammy. But has been part of the youth team that won the World Cup. And as far as we're concerned, they've been developed, born in England. Tammy, the 2 boys have been developed through English football. They're English players, and I'm sure they have huge desire to play for England at senior level.
You mentioned Fikayo Tomori. Was he another one that was impossible to ignore him, considering how well he's been playing for Chelsea?
Yeah, I think that his profile as a defender fits with the way that international football is. His athleticism is important. He's capable with the ball. We think it's a good opportunity for us to have a closer look at him with training in our group, because we haven't worked with Fik as closely as some of the other young players throughout the age groups. And he's in good form, and he'll be feeling confident about himself. So he's played very well for Chelsea in some big games against some big opponents, and it's again a great opportunity for him.
Is what Frank Lampard doing at Chelsea making your life easier as an England manager?
Well, I think that I've sat here for a few years or a couple of years and talked about opportunities for young English players, and given you my thoughts that we've got good players who just need the chance to go and play. Excellent academies who deserve to see their products in first teams. Now, the percentage-wise, we might only have had a small shift this year, but actually that relates to 3 or 4 players, and several of those have come into our thinking because we know them through the junior teams. We know what they're going to be capable of. So you don't have to shift that dial too much for it to change what's possible for us as a national team, and it's a hugely positive step.
You said it was very difficult picking this squad. Obviously, there's a few players missing. Carl Walker.
Yeah.
What was the thinking behind not including him, especially because Aaron Wan-Bissaka is not in the squad as well?
Yeah, well, I said last month that we wanted to look at a couple of the other fullbacks, different sort of profile. And I was really happy with what Kieran and Trent did in the matches. They're both in good form for their clubs. Kyle is also in good form for his club. Kyle is this slightly more defensive fullback, has good qualities with the ball, but the other two boys we felt did well last month, and we didn't feel the decision to change would be the right one.
Do you think Kyle will get another chance, or what does he need to do? Is there anything he needs to improve on to get another chance?
No, I think he's playing well. It's not a case of that he's playing poorly. We've just got really good competition in certain positions on the field. Attacking midfield is another one. We've got really good quality, really good competition for places. There are some really tight calls and difficult conversations to have with players. But I think over a couple of years we've made good decisions generally, and we've got to make sure that we watch every game, which we do, and we keep those assessments as clean as we possibly can.
And what's the thinking behind Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain not being involved?
Well, I've had a chat with Alex this morning. Really, last month we brought him back earlier than he probably would have been in a squad. He hadn't had a lot of football, but we wanted him to know that he's been part of our thoughts, reintegrate him with the group, give him a boost as he's getting towards more regular football. He's only had a couple of games since then, the first game back after the international break and then the League Cup tie. So it's a little bit like Delhi, really, where the season hasn't quite got going for either of them. But we're expecting them to challenge in coming months. But to put them in means I've got to leave somebody out who is in form and who's playing well. So, a Mason Mount or a James Maddison or one of those, they're in competition with those guys within the squad. So whenever you ask me about who I've left out, who am I leaving out to bring them back in, it's a difficult call in those positions in particular. And I think all of those players would recognise the rationale for the decisions.
Have you had a chance to speak to Jesse Lingard as well? Because obviously he's not involved. Is that because his form for Manchester United hasn't been that great this season?
I think Jesse's had a difficult period, and he's aware of that. I've got to retain huge faith in Jesse because he's a player that's always played well for us. He's never let us down. His performance level for England's been excellent. Again, as an attacking midfield player, you are going to be judged on your goals and assists, and when you look at the likes of Sterling and Sancho and the other players I've already mentioned, those numbers are high currently. So it's a really high bar. This isn't the competition is far greater than it was 12, 18 months ago because we've pushed young players in early and given them opportunities, and those guys have flourished. So again, Jesse is another player that we believe can fight back and fight his way back into the squad. But when you look at those three names we've just talked about, that shows you the competition for places that we've got. And
Fabian Delph is back in the squad. Mm-hmm. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, he's a different type of midfield player to the others. We need the balance. It's not fantasy football. We can't just put 11 attacking players on the pitch. So as a more defensive-minded midfield player, he's settled really well at Everton. I think he's had a big impact on their team. Has great leadership qualities, which are important to us. We've got a lot of young players in the group, but they need the guidance of some of our more senior players who've led us to being sort of 4th, 5th in the world for the last 12 months. When you look at the teams that are around us in those rankings, they've got a different profile of team, a lot more experience of winning big trophies. We've had to do it slightly differently, but we've maintained consistent performances. But a key part of that has been the spirit of the group and the importance of our senior players. We talk a lot about our junior ones and our young ones, who are hugely exciting, but the environment that's around them and the guidance of those more senior players has been critical in that journey. So Fabian's been a big part of that, and again, I think he's playing very well with Everton.
The final one from me, how close were Callum Hudson-Odoi and Phil Foden to making the squad?
Well, they're close. We know the quality that both of them have. Callum is just back from a long-term injury, and I had a good chat with Frank about Callum's situation. We agreed that a bit early for the seniors, without stealing AD's thunder. Obviously, there's an under-21 squad announced tomorrow, so but we think Callum is a player that's going to challenge for the squad moving forward, as will Phil be. But Phil's clearly difficult to assess exactly where Phil sits compared to others, given the opportunities at his club, which I totally understand because of the quality of players he's up against. So he's another player for the future. We have to be patient for his development, but that's fine. We think he's still progressing well. He's learning from one of the best coaches in the world, and his time will come.
Yeah, in that sense, Gareth, is Tammy Abraham something of an example for Phil Foden? I mean, clearly he's had to leave his parent club and go on loan and prove himself at a lower level. Maybe that's what Foden should do and other players in that position.
Well, every player has a different journey. Trent got straight into this team at Liverpool and stayed in there and has developed all of his career there. Hasn't had to have that loan move. Others have started in the lower divisions and worked their way up, and some have had the route that Tammy's had more recently, where he's always been at a bigger club and then had the loan moves. There's no perfect path. There's no everybody in youth development is looking and grasping with what is that perfect way to develop a player. It doesn't exist. It's different for them all. So he's training with good players every day. He's still a very young player, still physically developing a lot. Everybody's very excited about him, but equally, sometimes it wouldn't be the right thing always to put a young player into the spotlight with expectation too early. So I think everybody has to manage that very carefully.
I just wanted to ask you again about Chelsea. It is remarkable in some ways when now we see 4 young Chelsea players. And we know, of course, as you said, there's been an academy there in place. But now clearly there's a manager for various reasons who's giving those players an opportunity. A large part of that, Gareth, must be because you have Lampard there who has this affinity with the English national team, do you think? So having a manager there with a recent record of playing for England makes him more likely to bring players through to play for England, do you think?
No. I think the affinity is with the club, first and foremost, and an understanding of the quality of young players that they've got at the club. You can't put young players in just to put young players in. We've been very quick to say that. We have pushed young players because we think they're good enough. And if they weren't good enough, we wouldn't put them in just to buy ourselves time. So I think what you have with Frank is somebody that, along with Jody and Joe Edwards, they know everything about the academy. They know about the quality of players there. As I said, Neil Bath, Jim Fraser, for years at Chelsea have recruited excellent young players, developed them really well, and now they've had an opportunity. It's a shame 1 or 2 have maybe left in the last couple of years who would have also been in that team, I think. But for the group that are there now, great opportunity for all of them. Reece James last night as well. So that's no secret in terms of, you look at the England junior teams over the last few years, heavily stocked with Chelsea players, and it's great that they're getting the opportunity to play, and experiences like last night's winning away in a Champions League game for those guys is fantastic.
And just finally from me, I mean, it's always said that having to leave players out is the kind of the nice problem for a manager to have. But it is, I guess, an unusual problem for an English manager to have had in recent history. Does it mean you have to access another kind of aspect of your man management, Gareth, to be leaving players out?
Well, it's a nice problem in that you've got good quality of squad. It's the worst problem in terms of the conversations you have to have and letting players down, because having been a player, I know how important it is to want to play. You're desperate to be part of an England squad. I think for all of the guys we talked about earlier, there's definite opportunity to get back in, and for the boys that have got the opportunity to work with us over the next 10 days, they have to make sure they stay in. So we need that competition. All big teams have that competition, and that means that our training becomes competitive, which then leads into the performances in the games. So I would rather have good players, difficult decisions, than not so many good players and slightly easier decisions to make.
Okay, we'll go back to Carve for a few questions to close.
Gareth, this game in Prague is being played on a Friday night, and there's going to be a lot of England fans there, and obviously Prague is a great city to visit. Do you have any concerns about the behaviour of the fans going to this game?
Well, I think ever since I was a kid, I've watched England, followed England, played with England, managed England. And forever and a day, there have been huge numbers of supporters that travel and represent the country brilliantly, and a group who have tended to let people down. So sadly, that doesn't seem to have changed, although I think it has definitely improved from when I was playing. And we're talking more about antisocial behaviour now than hooliganism, which was the case in the 80s and 90s. But I would always say we're guests in people's countries. If we have people visit our country and we were out for a meal with our families, we would expect and hope that people were going to respect our country and behave themselves appropriately, and that would be what I would ask of our fans when they travel, really. We're brilliantly represented by so many. Some have let themselves down. There's no reason for that to be the case. We can go to foreign cities, you can enjoy yourself, you can have a few beers, you can soak up the atmosphere of the game. But let's be a proud representation of our country.
And obviously, after that, going to Sofia, where there have been issues for England teams in the past when it comes to racist abuse from Bulgarian supporters. Is that something you're concerned about? And also, you mentioned in the past that you want your players to get together perhaps next week and have a conversation about how they would deal with that kind of situation. Will that happen next week at St George's Park?
Yeah, I mean, I think we prepared when we went to Russia for the prospect of anything that might happen. I think following what happened in Montenegro, we feel it would be important that ahead of the next away game, wherever that was going to be, we were also prepared for so that the players understand exactly what our policy would be. You know, UEFA have some very clear guidelines on that, which we are now fully across and know how we would operate as a team in that sort of situation. I think it's important the players get the opportunity to discuss that, that they have clarity on and comfort that we're all very clear on the processes. But I also go back to the fact that we're talking about Bulgaria, but there are still instances across society in our country at the moment that aren't right as well. And we're not pointing the fingers elsewhere without recognising the fact that we have to get our own house in order as well.
Okay, guys, we'll end it there. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Let's go.